Hello, everybody. I am up and live. I was having some tech challenges in the background. Hopefully, I've got all those kinks worked out, so let me know.
Everybody, I am up and live.
I've got an echo.
Tech challenges in the background. Hopefully, I've got all those kinks worked out, so let me know. Everybody, I am up and live.
I've got an echo.
Tech challenges in the background. Hopefully, I've got all those kinks worked out, so let.
Okay, let's try that. Let's see if it's still echoing. My live or my chat hack, the chat decided to have a tech challenge on me, and so I've got a hack running, and I think that was causing the echo. I think I've figured out how to shut off the audio on what I've got going on, so let me know if you can see me and hear me okay. All right, you can see the chat. Michelle's here and can see the chat, and there's no echo, right? Let me know. Make sure there's no echo. All right, I'm going to give it just a couple of minutes to let people pop on. I'm glad I got things set up early because there's always some kind of tech challenge. I think I've got it figured out, and then something new pops up. So we will give it just another minute and see how we're doing with everybody. I'm going to get a sip of water while we wait for people to come in. Can see you and hear you, no echo. Excellent. That's what I want to know. And I can read your comments, and that will be helpful in case there's any questions. And also give me somebody to chat to while I'm here. Still die cutting. Yes, there was a bit of die cutting this month. So what I'm going to say is if you haven't done all your flowers or things, the important pieces that I'm hoping to focus on for the stream, the hat piece, I had you cut just a piece of brown like this. We're going to work on doing a technique with this and then die cutting this together. The flowers you can always add to the card later because that is the decoration of the card rather than kind of the focus feature of the card. So yeah, and of course this is always available to watch on replay. If you can't be here live or if you aren't able to keep up with what I've got going on, then you can always watch the replay. You can also pause a live stream. It just means that if you want to catch up to exactly where I am, you'll have to re-hit. There's a little button underneath the play bar that says live, and if it's kind of grayed out, that means you're not caught up to what I'm doing live. And if you want to click that button to re-catch up with real-time live, then you can do that. But yes, you can pause a live stream and keep working and keep watching along even if you don't want to keep up with the exact live. Hopefully that makes sense. Ooh. I've just spilled water on myself. I have excitement here. Let's get my little messy rag and clean myself up. There we go. I've made a mess for our live stream already, and I'm making the camera shake. What die cut should I move to the front of the line? Okay, we move the hat. There should be the hat and the extra hat brim, so do those. Make sure you have this piece up, and we are going to cut this one with the piece that comes from the stamper. This is the piece that is kind of the rubber on the stamper, so we're going to be working on that. And then I had you cut a lighter brown piece or another brown piece that's going to be some grounding to our card, and I'm going to show you just a little bit of a die cut. Let's do it this way. A little bit of a die cut thing we're going to do with the stem from the giant flower or the giant leaf that was part of the worm. So those are the pieces that we're going to work on first, and then the critter pieces are going to be the next step. So I'll take a pause and we'll cover some of the critter pieces in just a minute after we do some of this. So let me take care of a little bit of business. So welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. I know we have a few people who are watching, so hello and welcome. My video seems a little bit dark to me. I was messing with some settings and I can't seem to get it too much better, so hopefully it's not too bad. We will do our best. When I switch to the table cam, that should be a little bit better. So this is my Advent All Year series where I took my Spellbinders Crafty Advent Calendar from December of 25, and I am working with this once a month all year long to create some projects. I have instructions posted ahead of time on my blog. They should be posted also in the community tab here at YouTube, so that if you want to look at those instructions because you want to craft later, those should be available. Feel free to message me if you can't seem to find them and I will help you out. I am busy for the next few days, so it would take me until next week to get back to you, but I will be happy to help you out if you want to get those instructions. So the intention of this live stream is to be a craft along and that you have some homework that you've done ahead of time. And again, if you haven't done that, no worries. You can always work on the project later because this will be available on replay. Okay, I think I've covered the business stuff. Oh, I should say one more thing, that these live streams are happening once a month on the 4th Friday of the month at 4 p.m. Pacific time. So, oh, Emmeline. Emmeline told me she might pop on, so she is here. Hi, Emmeline. It's good to see you. I am going to switch to my table cam, and I will remain up there in the corner. So here is the card we are working on today. And the feature of this card is to get a critter and create a little bum for our critter, which was not a part of the die set at all, but I'm going to show you how to do that. And I've got 3 critter options. There's the bunny, I've got a way to make a cat, and I've got a way to make a dog. So we're going to go over the different critter options in a little bit because that is the focus of today's card. Let's work on a couple of techniques to get some of these pieces ready before we work on the critter. So to make these little flower planters, I am reusing the piece from the Advent calendar that came with that rubber stamper piece, and I don't have the days listed. Oh, I should have made that available. Let's see. Banner pieces, flower pieces. So this was from the rubber stamper day, whichever day that is. We're going to be using that to make these planters. We're going to cut the edge, and this is optional. We're going to cut the edge of this piece of ground to give it a little bit of undulation. And we are going to use the hat and the hat brim to create a terracotta flower pot. So let's start there. I'm going to save these pieces off to the side because we will do those next. So I have myself some little notes. I am using a little bit of mushroom ink to add some detail to these pieces before we put them together. I've got the extra piece of brim, and I'm going to trim off the impression where the ribbon of the hat would go, just so it makes a rim or a lip to our flower pot. I am going to trim, because the hat is wider at the bottom, we actually want it to be narrower at the bottom. So coming in a little bit, I'm going to trim just a little wedge of triangle, and it's really not very much from the bottom up to where it meets the brim of the hat. And that side, and then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And that is going to create more of a flower pot angle to it. So sometimes just a small alteration can create a different shape, and then our brains see that in a different way. I do need to keep my water here because my voice has been extra dry. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of shading detail to this. I am using a fairly dark brownish gray called Mushroom from Concord and Ninth. This color is it can be quite intense if I'm not careful with it. So I'm going to do my best to just get a little bit of color, and I'm going to add shadow in the depths of the project. So anywhere that is going to be overhanging or overhung. So I'm going to add the rim with some foam dots on top of the pot. So this bottom edge will be overhanging, and then the edge inside of our pot will be overhung. So both of those spots are going to get some shading, and I am just very lightly taking a tiny bit of that ink and dragging it up, and it may be a little hard to see without me zooming in, but I will hold this up to the camera in a moment. And then I'm going to do the same thing under the rim here, and let me get a little more ink because it's running out. Under the rim here, I'm going to do it on the sides towards the middle, and that's going to help create a rounding shadow. Is there a distress color that is close to Mushroom? You could always do it with the soot. I would just do it very, very lightly. But a gray color, or even if you use like Lost Shadow, that's going to change the color of your die cut. You could even do a darker tone than what your cardstock color is. So I'm using a Spellbinders cardstock, and I think this is called Sicily, and it's the closest I could get to a terracotta color. But you could always use an ink that is similar to your cardstock in a slightly darker shade, or even, you know, a slightly similar shade, because it will add depth to your cardstock. Whenever you add a color on top of an already, you know, colored cardstock, it will add some depth. So I'm going to do this little bit of shadowing along the edge, and you can see that just a little bit, but I will hold it up to the camera so that you can get a sense, and I will do just one side so you can see the difference. And this is gonna start making our pot look a little more three-dimensional. So we have our pot. And you can see I've added just a little bit of shadowing there, but not to this side yet. So you can see how it starts to change the dimension of the project. So I'm going to do the other side, and I think I'm going to bring it in just a little bit farther so that we have a little bit more rounding in that shadowing happening. And we've got some more people hopping on there. So hello, Meg. It's good to see you here. Thanks for joining in. I don't know how if you got the homework done ahead of time, or if you're just here to watch for now and work on things later. All right. So I think for me that is enough shadowing, but feel free to add as much or as little as you want. And depending on how I tip this one in the light, you can see that there's just a little bit of shadowing besides my finger shadow. Just a little bit of shadowing happening down here at the bottom. And I'm gonna pop that up on some foam dots, and then we'll set that one aside. So Meg, since you just popped in, this is the project we're working on. We're gonna do a couple of techniques first. We're gonna work on the critter second, and then I have 3 options for critters, so we'll get to doing those in a minute. So I'm going to pop these, just a couple of foam dots on here. And so this is kind of our first alteration today, is taking that magic hat from the Magic Bunny set and turning it into a terracotta pot. So if my camera will focus. There we go. So that is alteration number 1. I am going to wipe the ink off of the table. All right. The next thing we're going to do is create these two little planters. So I'm going to use more ink to create a striated look. This kind of mimics the look of wood grain, so it's a little bit of a wood graining technique. I learned that once upon a time from Gina Kay, so I like that technique. This just involves pulling your ink pad down across the cardstock. Depending on your ink pad and how juicy it is, you'll get different results. So I would recommend testing this on a scrap piece of paper first to see how your ink pad is behaving. And in fact, I'm going to take my own advice. These are my printout instructions for the day. And I did my original one with a ink cube, and full-size ink pads are going to behave a little bit differently than ink cubes. So we're just going to barely touch it and drag down. So if I touch it too hard, I'm going to get thicker ink. If I tip it and kind of drag down, I'm going to get more thick plank looking. So I think I will go ahead and tip it a little bit and drag it as gently as I can. Just a few motions across this cardstock, and then we're going to cut out two of these. I'm going to flip it around so I can do the other side, and then we will cut out two of these planters from this prepped technique piece. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good to me. And when you die cut, you can pick and choose the area that you like the best. So Meg, you're just watching today. I'm glad you think the card is cute. I thought so too, and we're focusing on giving our critters a little bum. And so we've got a cat bum and a rabbit bum, and the dog. We also have a bum for the dog. So that's kind of the goal of today. All right, I am going to go ahead and die cut this. I'm going to pick a couple of spots where I like the inking, and let me run that through. Helps if it's on. Okay, so we're gonna cut two of those. And again, you can set the pieces aside and assemble at the end if you want to keep up with the instructions part of today. So there is number one. And here is number two. So what has everybody got going on this weekend? I have a crop that I've been at since yesterday, and I am taking a break to come do our stream today, and the crop goes through the whole weekend to Sunday. Luckily it's close enough that I can pop home and keep our stream schedule going. All right, so there are our other planter pots. So we've altered up two different pieces to create different objects intended from the original dies. I did, on my samples, I did add some detail with a pen. I just used a regular ink pen, but it's at the crop because I forgot to bring it home. But this is a fine point Sharpie, and in this die cut, there are two grooves that are pressed in. So I'm just going to use the upper groove and add, and because I have a fine point, it will tend to just kind of nestle into that groove. So I don't have to worry about keeping my line straight. Kind of having it nestle into that groove will help keep it straight. Sometimes I slip, but that one did okay. So let's see if we've got the after and the before. And so what that line is doing is adding more of this lip dimension like we've added onto the pot, only instead of having to pop up a little tiny piece, we've just used the pen to add that dimension. So I will go ahead and do both pieces. Oh, see, that one slipped. I'm not going to worry about it too much because I can always recut the piece if it's bugging me. Let's see. Hello here. Scare class. I'm not quite sure. What crop is that? Northwest Crafters. The crop that I am at is Scrappy Girls Retreat, and this is my first time doing it. A friend invited me along because she's done it before, and it turns out there's a gang of us who know each other, so we're all hanging out there together. And so far, it's been a good retreat. It's in Portland, and it's at one of the hotels, and I'm not staying there because I live so close. But yeah, it's been pretty good. All right. And Emmeline is posting about the retreat. Yeah, because Emmeline is there with me, and I had to tell them I had to leave for this. Okay, so the next technique we're going to do is, this is a piece of craft cardstock, craft colored cardstock, and I'm going to use it as my ground. As you can see, a lot of it is going to get covered up, but I had added this little undulation to it, and you could just use a pair of scissors to cut that, but I find that they're a little awkward. But this die has a bit of undulation to it naturally. This one feels like a little too much curve to it to me, so I was using this one, and I'm actually going to hang the end off of one side so that when I come back this way I can keep moving the die cut forward, and I'm just going to tape that in place, and that will start a little curve to our card. Scrappy Girl Retreats. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing this weekend. What are you guys up to? Okay, so you can see we've got a bit of a curve going on. That part will get cut off when we do the next section. This part we don't need. So I'm just going to move it along and line up the elbow of this particular die somewhere along this line so that it doesn't create a weird shape. And if it does, it can always be trimmed down just a little bit. And when I practiced this one, it only took me 2 passes, but it might take you 3 passes depending on, it's like it's not quite reaching the end at this moment, so this one might take 3 passes. Okay, that is pass number 2. I think I might just use my scissors with this last bit because I think it's going to be covered by my pot. So I'm just going to do that. Where I lined up the 2 dies, I have a little bit of a harsh point, so I'm just going to nip that off. So like I said, you could do this with scissors, but I just wanted to show you that option because if you look at your dies, what I want people to get from this whole series is to look at them as shapes and see how your mind can play with those shapes and figure out other things you can do with them. So that is just one more way to look at different shapes. All right, I'm going to set that aside because we're done with that. So we have our ground piece, we have our planters. Let's go ahead and put the card base together. In here, I've got pre-cut the sky. I've got pre-cut just a piece off to the edge, and really this piece was just to add a different dimension to the card, so you could make your sky go all the way across if you want. You could make your ground go all the way across. It just left me a little bit of room to hang my banner with a little bit of texture and a different dimension to the card. So that was just the reason behind that. So I'm going to assemble these pieces by gluing down flat to the card the piece that I had you pre-cut and use the little embossing folder on. And then this piece I'm going to pop up with some foam tape. So I've got my chunky foam tape that helps the process go a little bit faster. So I'm going to use this, but feel free to use what you want. And then after we get this done, we will work on those critters. But we kind of need to have the grounding in place so that we can get our critter tucked behind everything just right, because the critter is not going to have an actual body. We're just making it look like the body is hidden behind the pot. So that is why we're trying to get these steps together. So I'm going to get this on here. I'm lining it up on the top edge. Sometimes I will put my card flat, put my piece flat, and then I can make sure they're aligned on this side with my fingers and get those in place. Let's see how I'm doing. Not too bad. Okay, and again, that will add a little bit more dimension to our card. There are some clouds that I had you cut, which is the worm head. And if you turn them upside down or right side up, you can get various shapes of clouds. I've got another one tucked behind here, but the flowers covered them up. You can add more clouds, fewer clouds, no clouds. It's up to you. All right. For the ground piece, this part is a little important because we're going to tuck our critter behind here. We only want to add glue to the very bottom, and this is where I like a liquid glue, especially with a fine point. So I'm just going to add a line of glue at the very bottom and attach that to my card. And the dimensions I had for you should have it match up the width of the blue piece, but if you want to make the whole thing wider, just adjust your dimensions. All right, let's go ahead and work on the critters next, and then we'll see about getting everything assembled. So I have got a bunny, which is on my sample card. I cut out one extra little white poof, and that came from the flower die set, and it makes these little flower bud kind of things, but we're going to use that extra bud as a poof for the bunny's tail. And then the rump of our critters is actually going to be the piece of toast from the bread set that had the peanut butter and jelly kind of bread set. So there are pieces that I had you cut to layer up the bunny. So let's go ahead and assemble. I have a little bit of extra pink that can go behind the bunny's nose. And then we'll add, I'm just going to cut this down so I can put it behind the bunny's nose. And then we have a black piece to go behind the bunny's eyes. So I'm going to actually add glue to the bunny itself. I like to make sure I do it on the back. And then I can glue the little bunny nose in place. I don't remember, does the die set outside toast or inside toast? I used the outside toast, so the bigger one. Yeah, good question. So that fits behind the bunny nose, and you can see now on that side, maybe, you can see now that the bunny has a little pink nose, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the black behind the eyes. And again, this is too big, so I'm going to trim it down, and I like to put the glue on the back of the bunny so that if I put it on this piece, I might get it where the eyes actually are, and that would squish the glue through. Then again, I added some pin detail, so I just used my pin in the groove of the nose. There's 3 little dots for kind of the whisker area of the bunny, so I just added that detail. But again, it's up to you if you want to do that or not. Let's get the bunny ears going. Got little pink cuts for that. Okay, and I'm going to leave my little tail poof on there for now. Okay, so what we're going to do with the piece of toast is we're going to cut it in half, making sure that we have the bumps on each half. So I'm just going to cut it right down the middle. And this bigger bump is going to become our bunny rump. So it's going to stick out from our pot on this side. We're going to use the extra piece to kind of bridge the gap between the bunny's head and the rump and the pot. So let me see if I can kind of show you on the card before we start gluing anything down. Fun stuff. I'm glad you think it's fun. I did too. I really like to look at my dies in different ways and come up with some different ideas. So we're going to lift up our ground and kind of tuck our pot back there. If you have some temporary adhesive, you might want to put just a little bit on your pot, because we're going to have to manipulate the bunny to get it under that pot. If we just tuck the bunny like this, you can see an awkward triangle of that sky paper showing through. And we're going to use that second half of the toast to kind of become the bunny's neck. And this will take a little bit of manipulation and trial and error to see how you like it to look, because I did it a little bit different multiple times. And then the other piece of the toast is going to get tucked under this way to be the bunny's rump. And you can experiment with, if you like it farther out, then you're going to have an awkward shape. If you like it further in, so there's just a little rump. If you want it to be up higher or down lower. I liked the bunny's rump. You can see kind of where the bunny's eye is located here. I liked the bunny rump to be set slightly lower than the bunny's eye. It felt more realistic to me. Not that we're making real animals here, but you know what I mean. All right, so I am going to tuck the bunny that way, figure out where I want the rump, and then I'm going to go ahead and glue my second piece onto, I will remove this pot. I'm going to glue this one onto the bunny rump and kind of figure out how to hide any gap between the bunny head and where we're going to put that pot. I know that's a little tricky to do, but just keep fussing with it until you get where you like it. So now I've got a little piece of the bunny head that looks like kind of a neck now. So I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to leave those two pieces glued in place, and I'm going to go ahead and glue that bunny head on because I liked that positioning. And I will have to trim off this edge of the bunny rump. So I only put glue in the middle because this edge was sticking out. Smaller scissors would help. This edge was sticking out. So I'm going to trim that piece off. I did lose my head, so let's go ahead and try this again. There's my pot, and now that piece isn't sticking out. I'm going to rotate this just a little bit because I want more of a round rump, and then we'll get my bunny head back on there. Okay, that's looking pretty good. While that guy is still in place, I'm going to add my little poofy tail. So I had my little bunny poofy tail sitting aside, and I'm going to add it like that. So think about which way you want. There's some lines in that little bunny poof for the tail. Think about which way you want those lines to go. The bunny is cute, yes. Hi, Karen. It's good to see you here, too. All right, so I've got the lines of my bunny tail going this way, and I just like that better, but think about what you like, and you can add the poof to your bunny. All right, so that was the bunny. Let's go ahead and talk about the other critters. I have got, here's my sample critter. This is a cat, and you can see I've pieced him together with other colors of cardstock as I was just practicing and playing, but I found out that using the other half of the toast worked just fine. So we are going to create this little kitty next, and this little kitty has a cute little tail, and I did add some pen work to color him. You could add inking, you could add stripes of paper and glue those down, so there's lots of options here. I'm gonna go ahead and set my bunny aside because he is done and ready to go. Let's work on the kitty. So I'm gonna leave the kitty. Let's clear up some space here. I'm gonna leave the kitty there so you can see what that looks like in case you want to do the kitty. Let's get some of this distraction off the screen. Okay. For the kitty, we are starting with the same bunny head, and we are going to, let's see, yes, we are going to trim off the bunny's ears. Luckily it's just paper, it's not a real bunny, but I tell you, it did feel a little odd to start cutting into the head of an animal. So I'm going to trim off the bunny ears to get us started. The other thing about a cat face is that they have a narrowness that comes down to the point of their chin. So we're going to use kind of the same technique we did with the flower pot. We're going to make some more narrowness to the cat's face. So I'm going to start by just cutting off a diagonal. We'll smooth out that edge in a moment. And I'm going to cut off a little triangle diagonal piece on this side. And then I'm just going to use my scissors to give a little bit of a smoothing here. I'm not going to worry about it too much. Don't stress out about it. It's just paper. But there we go. I think that's going to be better. With my pen, I did a little zigzaggy scribble in kind of a triangular shape to give a little detail. I gave those little dots for the whiskers. Let's see, my pen. I did the little dots for the whiskers, and then I just do a quick flick to make actual whiskers. So flick, oop, helps if you hold your paper down. So flick, 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 flick. There we go, now we've got it. And then again with the other side. Put the dots for the whisker, and then flick. Oh, that one didn't quite go. Flick, flick, flick. And if you want to practice the flicking on a scratch piece of paper, you can do that. Okay, so that is most of the face. We do need to get some ears for our cat, which I used the same inner pieces that we cut for the inner bunny ears. I cut them in the same color as the cat, and these are going to become the whole cat ear. So I am going to, before I do that actually, let's back his eyes and nose because we don't want these pieces to end up being behind the eyes. So I chose a little strip of blue to go behind my cat eyes. And then I've got a little strip of black for the cat nose. So I'm going to do the nose first, and that way I can glue a bigger piece for the eyes behind both eyes at the same time. Good use for the Micron Tiny Pen. Yeah, I left my Micron at the crop, so at the retreat, and I'm using my little fine point Sharpie, and that's probably why, let's see, it's good to close it up after you use it, so that it doesn't dry up. Okay, so I've got my nose, and then I'm gonna do a little piece for the eyes. Try and keep the mess off to the side. Let's see, was that small enough? Oop, I'm gonna cut it down a little bit more. All right, let's glue this onto our eyes, or behind, I should say, behind our eyes, so that we can get our ears on there. Oh, did I make it too small now? Okay, I think I made it too small. So I'm gonna cut it in half and spread it out. I was trying to avoid making it too big, and then I made it too small. But there's usually a solution for most mistakes. Okay, and then if you wanna go for it, you can use your fine point pen again to just do one little tiny dot in the eye to give your kitty a pupil. I find this to be a little tricky because if you get one dot up here to the left and one dot down here to the right, your kitty will be a little cross-eyed. So just know that you can always give it a try and see. So I'm going to just try and aim for the middle of my hole. So one little dot there, Nope, but my pin is, let's see, I'm trying to get my pin revived because it got a little dried out sitting open. So one little dot there and one little dot there. And I think I got it okay. No cross-eyed kitty. It's not too bad, but he'll look a little bit better when we get his ears on there. So Michelle says, I think I'm just gonna cut the bunny without ears and then save the heart from cutting the face. Okay, I see. I think I see what you're saying. So you can alter up the head however you like it to look. The point is that you look at the shapes and see if you can find different shapes in different pieces. All right, so I've got that inner bunny ear. I'm going to glue it onto the kitty at a little bit of an angle, and you don't want them to be really long because kitties have short little angly ears. So I'm going to slide it down so I just have a little bit poking through, and then I'll do the same thing on the other side. And I just kind of put it up at the top of the curve that we created when we trimmed off that angle. I added just a little bit of a triangle pin work into the ear to give it that inner ear look. And that, if I can get my camera, that finishes off our little kitty face. Oh, I missed his little lip area. So I will do that. Little lip area. There we go. Oh, I forgot. I added from the lip area, I added the pin work to give it more of that kitty face. So just a little swoop. So again, we're going to look at this. We're just going to do a little swoop, make sure my pin is working. And we're going to make it smaller than that for sure. So I'm going to start at the bottom and a little swoop to the right and a little swoop to the left. And now we have, there we go, I almost missed that step. Now we have more of a cat face. So sometimes not only is the shape of the die that you're working with important to creating and building a new idea, you might need to add some pin work or ink work or something like that to continue the illusion that we're creating. All right. For the tail, I die cut the worm, but I didn't die cut the whole worm. I just die cut the end of the worm's tail. This has a few of those pressed in grooves in there, and I used pin work to detail these as well. I'm just going to do a little bit this time around, and I've got new glasses, but I tell you, they're not working all that great, so I'm having a hard time seeing. Hopefully your eyes are working better than mine. Okay, I think that's probably enough of a pin work for the tail. Then we're going to take our toast, the same large toast size. We're going to do the same thing by cutting it in half. And then we're going to start assembling our pieces. So again, I'm going to get my pot in place, figure out where I want my cat rump to be. This one's going to be more important because the cat's head has less structure to it since we trimmed it. So the extra piece that we're going to use to attach everything together is going to come into play a little bit more on this one. I'm kind of finding that I'm using the little side of the hump of the toast, and I'm kind of wanting to angle it farther down so that it looks more like a shoulder. I'm not really in video, but it looks more like a shoulder hump for our cat. And I'm going to glue my cat's head closer to the top. All right, I know I've got some stuff peeking out there. We'll trim off the rest of that later. But here's our cat tail, and we're going to tuck it under the rump. And then you can kind of angle it however you want your cat tail to be angled. I know when I assembled my card, I left these flowers short on purpose so that we can see the rump and whatever tail we decide to add into that space. I also had planned in adding some extra greenery in here. So think about that if you're making your cattail. Right now it's hanging off the edge of the card, so I think I'm going to rotate my cattail up a little bit more, and that looks good. So now I'm going to start gluing. I'm going to add glue to the top of my cattail. I'm going to carefully lift up the rump, tuck it under, and that looks pretty good. So I'm going to move the pot out of the way, trying not to move too much other stuff, and tucking some glue. Again, gluing in the middle so that we can trim off excess edges. And then I'm going to add some glue to the back of my cat head and just kind of glue it to, I can line it up with the inner lump, the inner point of this lump, and kind of make it at a straight line coming off of that. I'm going to try and make sure that I don't glue it to the back of the card, since we've got one more critter to demonstrate. And if that's staying in place well enough, I will go ahead and trim off that piece, which is going to hide behind our flower pot. All right, so now we've got a little kitten peeking out from behind our flower pot. So this kitten looks like he ended up being a little bit wider than my example. So just play with those pieces and shuffle them and shift them into place until you get the shape that you like. All right, so that is our kitten. Now we're gonna do a puppy. How we doing on time? Okay, we're getting to the hour, but this is the bulk of the ideas for the card today. A lot of the rest of it is just assembling all those die cuts. And if you don't have all the die cuts cut yet, then you can just work on it at your own pace. All right, I have a bunch of parts, and here is the example of our little puppy. And I thought this guy was very cute. We had a dog die set in our advent calendar this year, but the angle the dog was kind of laying on its back, and it didn't look right for this use. It looked really awkward and wrong. So I was looking at the other pieces as a way to make a different style of dog. So we're using a lot of the exact same pieces. We're going to start with that bunny head. Now I decided to make my dog a dark brown because my sample was cut out of the same craft as the actual, my dirt. And I just thought it would look a little cuter if I made my dog a different color. So that's the only reason why I changed up the color. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to cut off the ears. This time, that's all we have to cut off. We don't have to make any other alterations to the face because our puppy has a nice wide face. I did back the puppy with black for eyes and nose, and I was worried these would be a little too dark, but I think it's looking okay. I will just keep that. So go ahead and back your puppy eyes if you're crafting along with me. And that piece looks like it's a little too big. I'm gonna have to trim off a little bit from the top here. A little bit, flip it over. Just nip off those corners that are sticking out from behind the puppy's head. There we go. I think that's looking good. I also used pin work to add detail onto the face. So you can go ahead and do that if you want to. I'm going to skip that for now. I added a collar onto our puppy, and that is just done with scraps. There wasn't a specific die to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and glue the bottom of my puppy's head onto a flat edge of a colored scrap. I chose yellow, but you can of course make your puppy's collar whatever color you want. Now this is sticking out over the end, so I'm just gonna cut straight up so that it matches the width of the puppy's head. And the rest of this is gonna get covered up, so you don't have to worry about that too much. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it around. I'm going to flip it over because, let's see, because the head does angle in a little bit, it kind of makes my scissors want to curve. So I'm going to keep that in mind and just kind of try and nip straight down. It doesn't matter too much, but we'll see how that goes. All right, when we put the puppy's body on, that will glue on top of, let's go ahead and do it. Let's go ahead and do it. Let's cut our toast in half again, like we did before. And for the puppy, I used the flatter side of one of the toast pieces. And when we glue it on top of the yellow, that is going to create a little zone for your puppy collar to be. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm just going to add glue to this top straight edge so that I have room to use my scissors to nip off extra bits if I need to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and leave a little bit of that gap of yellow peeking. I'm going to shift it this way so that I have it flush against this side, because we know this side is going to be hidden more under that pot. All right, and then the final detail I added to the collar was to use a pin to draw a dot and a little bit of a line, and that looks like the buckle on the collar. So I will go ahead and do that part. So I made a nice big dot and a little bit of a line next to that. And there is what looks like the buckle on the collar. So we need to also get our puppy ears on there. At this point, all of that stuff is glued together so we can get our ears on. Now notice my puppy's ears are kind of at different angles. So we're going to cut these, I believe, are the ears from that original puppy die. So we're just going to repurpose those, and we're going to make them at different little angles. So I'm going to take this one. Notice they have slightly different curves on one side than the other. So play with those. Do you like it this way with this flat side up? Or do you like it this way that has more of a downward swooping curve? Do you want your ear to be sticking more up? Do you want your ear to be flopping down? And I thought it was cute to have one of each. And this little ear I will make hang over our pot, so that we have a little bit of dimension by overlapping pieces. So I am going to glue my puppy ear that way, and then I'm going to take my second puppy ear and I'm going to glue it a little higher up. Let's see, do I want it? Sure. I'm going to glue this one a little bit higher up so that I can flop it over. I'm going to overlap it over that pot. So there you go. That is the idea for the puppy ear. We still have our little puppy rump to build up, so I will tuck the rump under there. And let's see, our puppy is a little bit longer, so if I pull this out too far this way, it looks like a wiener dog, so you could go with that. If I push it in a little bit farther, we've got more of a little round guy. And so I like it a little more round, so I'm gonna push mine in farther. For our puppy tail, we've got the same place that we started with the cat, but we're gonna nip it off to give it a different shape, because a dog tail is slightly different than a cat tail. They're not as pointed, they're not as long. So I'm gonna count 1, 2, 3 of these little impressed marks on the die. I'm gonna cut down 3 and I'm gonna nip that off, but I'm gonna kind of nip it on a curve. It is a little tricky because it's small. Just do the best you can. And I'm gonna start here and I'm gonna go slowly, and I'm gonna, instead of rotating my scissors, I'm gonna move my paper. So I'm just gonna kind of rotate it as I cut, and that made a little sharp point here. So instead, I'm gonna keep nipping until I have a little bit of a roundedness to the tail. So hopefully you can kind of see how that came out rounded. And then I'm going to add the tail onto my puppy, so we can make the tail go this way, We can make the tail go that way, longer, shorter. I think actually I kind of like it. So my die cut is actually upside down, and I kind of like it up higher because it looks more like a waggy tail. And this tail looks more like a stumpy tail. So you have different options for your tail shape. I'm gonna make sure I'm putting my glue on the right spot. So top side of the tail, because it's gonna tuck under and get glued onto that rump piece to give my puppy a little waggy tail. All right, I'm gonna glue these pieces in the middle. And then I think I needed to cut off a little bit of this one. Don't quite remember if it was shifted on me. Don't quite remember. Let's put our pot back in place and see how that's looking. Maybe shift it that way just a little bit. Okay, that's looking good to me. We've got a puppy. So there you go. Look at that guy. He's kind of cute. He is kind of cute. All right, and then, so there's just a lot of assembly at this part. I'm gonna get myself a little more comfortable. I think the only other thing that I kind of altered up to be different than what was expected is that we cut a whole bunch of these extra banner pieces that are used to create our sentiment. And of course you could do a different sentiment if you don't want to do the banner. I cut them out of green, and if we turn them upside down, they're gonna look more like grass. Especially, I've got one this is the 5 pieces long, and then I've got one that is the 3 pieces long. I'm going to nip off one of the 5, so I'm left with 4, and then I'm gonna glue on top of that the one of 3, but I'm gonna glue it over the grooves that separate them. And I'm not going to glue it all the way to the top. I'm going to pull it down just a little bit. Let's see if we can see this a little better, so that the V shape of the banner is offset from the 2 on either side. And I think that's showing up okay on camera. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on the card. I am going to add glue to my banner pieces that are the 4 that we just nipped off the 5th one from, and I'm going to glue that straight to the very bottom of the card along the very left edge of our little grass grounding area. And you only want to add glue to the bottom, again, because we're going to be tucking layers. Then for the second layer of grass, I'm going to add a little bit of glue just to the top of that grass, because I'm going to overhang it and then trim off the excess part of the banner. So I am overlapping those grooves. See if I can do this while I'm looking at the screen. Hanging it off the edge so you can see that the banner part is hanging over the edge. We'll nip that off in a minute. And we've covered up the grooves in between. And now it looks like we have a little bit of grass growing instead of just plain ground. Of course, if you like the plain ground, you can keep it that way. As long as your glue is set enough, then you can just nip along that edge to get your grass. Okay. With one of the planters, I'm going to do a very similar thing. So I'm going to grab some more of our green banners, and I'm going to glue this. Let's see, I'm trying to remember how many I did. Obviously that is too long, so I'm going to nip off one of them. And I'm just going to very gently let the tips of those triangle pieces poke up. And this is going to create another type of greenery just for difference and texture. So I'm going to add just a tiny nip of glue to the very top of these pieces. And then I need to set this down because I don't think I can manipulate all that. And then I'm going to put that on top. I will slide it around so that it's kind of sitting in the middle. Slide it down just so those pieces are peeking out. We can cut off anything. You see we've got a little bit peeking out on the bottom corner. We'll cut that off after the glue sets. And then we're going to go ahead and add another layer behind that. Same thing, we're going to offset in between those pieces. So we're getting this kind of zigzaggy sawtooth looking element to that greenery. So it just looks like a different kind of plant. So I'm going to put the glue just a little bit lower so that I can manipulate this better without getting glue all over my fingers. And you could make them taller, shorter. I'm just going to make them about the same height. And then I think my first bit of glue is good enough that we can nip that off. Okay, I'm looking at our time. We've gotten to the top of the hour. I think I'll do a few more things before I send you off on your own. For the rest of this flower pot, we had these white flowers assembled. We've got our little poof, and it's on top of the little bud piece and then the little stem piece. I don't know if I think I mentioned this in the instructions, but my advent calendar set was missing the original stem that came with the flowers, and I just replaced it with the stem that came with the lucky clover on the very last day, the 24th. So you can maybe notice a difference because my stem is slightly different. So these can get glued in here when you're ready to glue those together. Maybe, let's see, I'm going to set it aside for now just so I make sure I get through the rest of it explaining everything before I let you go. So then with our other planter, I took some of these flowers and I'm nipping off a leaf. So this flower has the left leaf on, and the other flower I nipped off, or the right hand leaf I nipped off, and I'm going to use that sticking up out of this planter so that we look, again, we just have more variety without having to cut a lot of different dies. And then I think I will leave my puppy on here, and then I'm going to add my flower into there. I had one more flower where okay, so this flower is hiding in the back. You can see one leaf on the left, and I nipped off the leaf on the right. And I'm going to add that to the other side of my flower planter. And then with the little yellow leaves, I just layered them up on top of the planter. So I put this one on first with one of the leaves on top and the second leaf kind of in that groove as if you were going to put it on perpendicular. And then I kind of lay it flat so that one of the leaves is behind and one of the leaves is in front, and that creates more levels of dimension. Another one I just put directly on front, and then the third one I just put directly behind everything, and that creates layers of interest. And then that will get glued on here. I added a little bit more of this grass technique to the very edge of our soil, our dirt, so that you can do that if you want. We can tuck this planter behind here. You can also just kind of use your fingernails to kind of curl up the little tips of things to give them more dimension, and also that will make it fit better behind everything. And then we've got our flowers that can get added in there. Let's see, this planter will go on this side if you want to add the grass. Let's talk about finishing off the main pot. Let's see, oh, big leaves, big leaves. So with these big leaves, I did add a little bit of shading again, just like we did on the pot. I'm making a mess here. Just like we did on the pot, I just used the same ink and pulled in a little bit of shading from the edge of our big leaves, and we're just gonna stand them up straight in the pot. So this flower goes in front of everything, and then I put one big leaf at an angle behind that flower. Then, let's see, I think I'm gonna have to glue things or it's not gonna sit in there correctly. So I'm gonna put this flower in front of this big leaf. I will glue that flower. It's gonna be at an angle, so I'm gonna kind of glue it a little bit down from the tip, and then we can glue a little bit farther up. We can glue that into our pot, kind of like that. So add a little bit of glue to everything. Put it behind our pot. I'm going to try and make sure that leaf is still showing. Let's see, then I've got one more big leaf sticking up. This flower that we have, the right hand leaf, is going to kind of wiggle in between those two big leaves. And so it's going to sit more like that, with it's behind the one leaf, it's in front of the second leaf, and then we can put our third leaf on here and get our third flower. I did have them all cut, and you can decide if you want to tuck it in front, behind. You can manipulate where these leaves are going. I think that's looking good enough for me. I'm just going to add a whack of glue to all this to hold it together. Oh, that's the wrong glue. That's this one. I'm just going to squeeze that all in there. Just to kind of hold everything together. Puppy ear goes on top. Tuck it all in there. Okay. And then you can add a little bit of foam behind your pot if you want to give it a little more room back there to lift up, or you can just go ahead and glue it flat. Make sure you add some glue behind your puppy. And then the banner for the sentiment. I went ahead and cut off at the Y. I cut it smooth and flush against the Y. And then I'm going to bend up each little piece just a little bit. These are kind of delicate, so you could double this up if you are worried about it ripping before you do this part. And that's going to let us drape it. And I'm going to hide where we cut off the edge of the banner underneath a flower so that we can drape it from edge to hidden edge. And then I'm going to do the same thing with day. Put it down here and then drape it upwards so that we can hide that part of the banner under one of the other letters. So it looks all continuously hanging and draping. And I'll show this one because it's already glued in place and very tidy. And then of course there was the clouds that we talked about. So I think I've got everything covered. Aw, thank you, Karen. Karen says the cards are super cute. I have cats. I'm a cat owner and the kitten is cute, but I have to say, I think this little puppy is a cutie pie. So that is the project for today. Hopefully everything made sense. Again, if you have any questions at all, let me go ahead and switch to my face. There we go. Oh, see, my camera did it to me again. I am going to try hold please as I mess with some of these settings because for some reason, there we go. for some reason it's going dark on me. I don't know why. All right, banners are very fun. Yes, they can do a lot. Banners can do a lot, and they turned into grass today. You guys are welcome. Very cute. I'm glad you guys like it. Thank you for being here. And if you have any questions on this project or what's coming next month, I will probably in about 2 weeks, I'll have the instructions up for next month's live stream. And I have a hard time keeping secrets, but it's going to be cute. We're going to do an interactive element on next month's card and make a cute kind of girly card. So that's what we've got planned for next month. So thank you all for being here. Oh, I see some hearts going on. Thank you guys. It's been a fun live stream, and I hope you learned something fun. I will see you next time.